my name is Mo and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be playing around with some gouache and doing some studies of the human skull. Now the gouache I'm going to be using for these studies is actually the HIMI/MIYA Jelly Gouache, and I bought this set a couple months ago back when we really hit the craze of the jelly gouache. And if you can't tell by the video, this set is well loved. I adore these paints, guys. They're bright, they're vibrant, and while they do have the same issue that gouache always has, it's a different color when you re-wet it and it dries slightly different. I honestly feel like these paints have less of it than most of the other brands of gouache I've tried. I picked these up for about $18, I think 6 months ago. The price has gone up a little bit, but they are pretty cheap on Amazon, so I've left a link to those in the description down below. Now, it sounds incredibly pretentious to say, but I'm actually classically trained when it comes to painting. My very first experience with painting at all was oil paints in a classroom setting. And that's why you'll see me and a lot of other artists too lately completely paint over our sketch in the very beginning, usually with a bright color. This is partially to help establish a background, but toning the paper like this can also really help you to establish your values, because in the real world, very few things are truly bright white. Other than obviously the left side of this video, because it was an incredibly bright and sunshiny day out when I was filming this. Another reason for toning the paper is the undertones it can actually bring to your painting. A lot of times when I'm painting figures or people, I'll try and tone the painting with a reddish brown or dark orangey color, and that's to add a little bit of warmth to the skin. While here I'm using the blue that will both be the background, but also add some dreary coolness to the actual painting of the skull. And you can see I started out with just a wide, flat brush, and this is because I have a tendency when I start out with a smaller paintbrush to get really focused on all of the details right away instead of just establishing the shapes and working from there. If you're using a wider, larger brush, it's a lot easier to just get the colors and the shapes and the forms out onto the paper, and then you can work on the details from there. This also really helps me because I have a bad tendency to overwork my drawings a lot, and using a larger paintbrush helps to make sure I don't go straight into those details and add way too many. Now right about here is actually where this painting hit the ugly phase for me. Every painting has one, and some of them never get out of them, and when I hit the ugly phase on this painting, I was ready to give up. It was obviously very unfinished, but it already just wasn't coming together the way I wanted it to. The anatomy was off, I couldn't push my values deep enough, and the whole painting was just frustrating for me. I was absolutely ready to scrap it, give up, and just watch YouTube for a few hours instead. But I decided to push through with this one, and I'm actually really glad I did. While the finished painting is far from perfect, it's definitely a lot better than just looking at this ugly phase would tell you. One of the things that was so bad about this painting that had me really noticing the ugly phase was actually the anatomy of the upper jaw where I've ended the skull in the painting. And that's when it becomes really important to step back for a minute, take a better look at your reference or your setup, and really try and figure out where you're going wrong. Does it just look bad because you have yet to establish very many of the details? Or is it because your anatomy is off and there's inconsistencies in the fundamentals of the piece? You can see that 90% of this painting coming together is just establishing those values and then pushing them. While this painting is mostly black and white, it's not full grayscale, but it's more grayscale than a full color piece would be. So it's a lot easier to see the contrast and push the values. 90% of bringing any painting together is just really establishing the shadows and the light, and then pushing those values as much as you can. The same way when you're editing a picture and it looks so much better when you turn the contrast slider up more, painting is nearly identical to that. When you push the values, it really defines what it is you're looking at and makes it a lot easier to read. And here's where I really realized those inconsistencies in the anatomy, and I started trying to fix those by elongating the teeth a little bit. And this is where this painting really begins to come out of the ugly phase and together a little bit more. And it's right about here actually that I got down on my hands and knees and put my face really, really close to my paper to do some details. If you've been paying attention, you've seen bits of my hair, the side of my head in the right side of the frame, but I actually got down and had my face about an inch or two away from the paper. The reason behind this being that my hands are very, very shaky, and if I'm working from a distance, I have a really hard time doing fine details. So at this point, I was really ready to define those teeth a little bit more and draw in some of the little grooves and cracks in the bones, and I needed to get down there to make sure that I could be as accurate as possible. Also, I'd just been standing for a while painting this. This whole painting took about 45 minutes and I was tired of standing. So it was nice to kind of get down there and work up close and personal with the painting. So at this point, I'm thinking we're just about close to done. I'm not trying to be perfect or super accurate here, as it is just a study to become more comfortable with the anatomy. So we zoom in really close and I just do what I would consider some fine finishing details, drawing in some cracks and adding a little bit more shading and highlights, once again pushing those values as much as possible. And there's my glasses in the side of the frame again from getting too close to my paper while I work. And that's where my camera died, and I actually didn't notice and kept working on the painting, but luckily I only worked on it for another 4 or 5 minutes, just adding another crack to the forehead area and a few more white highlights. I wasn't going for a finished, fully realized piece, but more just trying to familiarize myself with the anatomy again and also really work on those shadows and the placement of light in the texture of the skull. And that's all I've got for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed it. Let me know what kind of studies you'd like to see me do next down below. and I'll talk to you guys again soon.